Hello, and welcome to our third installment of Spooky Tuesdays. Friends, we have a special one for you today. We are talking about vultures. Now, vultures are considered creepy for a couple of different reasons, but they are super cool animals. They have awesome adaptations, and they bring an incredible value to our ecosystem. Cannot be overstated. So, let's get started talking about vultures. So today on Spooky Tuesdays, we have a special guest. Everyone meet Victor the Vulture. He's a museum exhibit piece, and he's going to be helping us learn about vultures today. Now, before we dig into the nuts and bolts of what makes a vulture, we're going to talk about them a little bit more broadly for a second. First of all, there are 23 species of vultures that live worldwide. Now, those are usually divided into two groups. One is the Old World group of vultures, and those are the species that inhabit places like Europe, Asia, and Africa. And then there are the New World species, which inhabit the Americas. And those are the species we're probably most familiar with. Those include things like the king vulture, the California condor, the black vulture, and the turkey vulture, which is what this guy is. Now, specifically in South Carolina, we're going to see the turkey vulture and the black vulture. Now, the turkey vulture is the most widespread of any of the vultures here in the Americas, and they're easily distinguishable by their red head and by the way that they fly, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. So that gives us kind of a broad overview. Now we're going to jump into more about vultures. So now that we know that vultures really fall into two main categories, let's talk about those specific South Carolina vultures that we mentioned before, the turkey vulture and the black vulture. Now both of these guys, like other New World vultures, really hunt by smell. So they can actually smell a dead carcass from over a mile away. So those gases that are released when a dead animal starts to decompose, that's what they can smell, and that's what they hone in on. That's a little different from their Old World counterparts that really hunt more by sight, okay? Now, vultures in general, you can normally identify them because they're in a group, right? So they're in a big group, and when they're flying like that, that's what we call a kettle of vultures, all right? So they're up there really high riding those thermals. Now there's a few differences between the black vulture and the turkey vulture. We're going to look at those a little bit more closely in flight here soon. But some other differences between the two. Number one, turkey vultures, when they're eating, tend to eat alone. They're more aggressive and they kind of want to scare off other ones. But black vultures like to do quite a bit as a group. That being said, they both eat carrion, which are dead animals, but the turkey vulture feeds exclusively on carrion, where the black vulture will actually kill animals. So the black vulture can actually be a menace in some other parts of the country where they will actually kill like calves, like young baby cows. So that makes them really, really different. Other things, we know that our turkey vulture has that red head and the black vulture has a black head, but they both roost in communities at night. So you'll find them in big groups, and whenever you have them in a big group like that that's roosting, we call that a committee, okay? And then if you ever see a group of vultures that are feeding together, right, those are probably black vultures, those are going to be called a wake. So that's a few things about the different vultures that we're actually going to see here. Let's go check out some other stuff. All right, guys, so let's talk about the good stuff. What makes a vulture a vulture? There's so many cool things about their bodies that make them so different from other birds, and they exhibit some pretty cool behaviors that we don't see in other animals. So number one, we'll notice that this guy has a bald head, right? That's pretty indicative of a vulture, and that serves a couple of different functions. Number one, it helps keep them clean while they're eating, and number two, it helps with thermoregulation, right? And that means it helps keep them cool, helps control their body temperature. All right. This guy also has perforate nostrils, which means you can actually see all the way through his nose hole. He does not have a septum like we do in the middle. So that's pretty cool as well. Now, something interesting is about their stomach acid, friends. So while they're eating, getting kind of gross, right, they actually have stomach acid that is 100 times more concentrated than human stomach acid. It is so powerful and corrosive, it can actually dissolve metal. Now, that's important because it helps process all the bacteria that is in those dead animal carcasses, okay? So what that means is that they're not carrying diseases and passing them along the food chain. That means because their acid is so powerful, as soon as they eat it, that bacteria, those diseases die. So it actually stops with vultures. That's amazing, okay? So they have a bald head. They have this incredible stomach acid, okay? They also vomit. Okay, now they vomit for a couple of reasons. Number one, they vomit to feed their young, which, okay, lots of animals do that. But number two, they vomit if they're disturbed or frightened, right? So let's say you see a vulture on the side of the road eating a deer, okay? And then a car gets too close or someone comes up next to it or whatever, and it disturbs the vulture. That vulture will actually vomit Number one, to lighten the load so that he can take off and fly, but number two, because it helps ward off predators. Now, friends, thinking about how potent that stomach acid is and what they're actually eating, I think that would do a pretty good job of warding off predators. So those are some pretty gnarly things. And then they also urinate and defecate on their own legs and feet, again, for thermoregulation. So they have figured out ways to keep their body temperature regulated. They've figured out ways to keep themselves healthy, right? And not covered in gross stuff. And they're just incredible. So all of these adaptations and behaviors are very specific to vultures. It makes them super cool, and it makes them an animal that we should want to protect. So let's talk about something else. All right, friends, so real quick, we're going to learn how to ID these vultures in the wild. So whenever we look up and we see those vultures way up high riding those thermals, the easiest way to identify them is by looking at their wings. Now we know that up close or on the ground, we can ID them by looking at their head color, right? Turkey vulture has a red head like Victor, and black vultures have a black head. However, when they're way up high like that, the easiest thing to do is to do this. Look at their wing patterns, okay? So if we were to see a vulture flying high and we see that the bottom half of his wings are a light gray color, we know we're looking at a turkey vulture. He also has a little bit longer tail. If we were to see this vulture flying around with just the tips, right? Just the fingertips, his little wing tips are that dark gray color, then we know we're looking at a black vulture, okay? And he has a little bit of a shorter tail. And then finally, if we were to look at these guys in comparison, we see our turkey vulture up here with the bottom half of his wings, longer tail compared to the black vulture, where he has those little wing tips that are that gray color, and he has a shorter tail. So that's how to tell vultures apart in the wild. All right, so this is what we would call a kettle of vultures, okay? So there's actually several vultures flying, both black and turkey vultures, and they are flying around in a group and circling, and that is what we call a kettle. So let's talk about why they're important. Part of Spooky Tuesdays has been learning about how these animals fit into their habitat and what important jobs they play within their ecosystems. And friends, we would be in a tough spot without vultures. They are literally the public sanitation workers of the animal world. They help control the spread of disease by eating carcasses that other animals can't or won't eat. This is incredibly valuable, and if you'd like to know just how valuable, you can always read a little bit more on the Indian vulture crisis that's been occurring there for about the last 30 years. Unfortunately, several species of vulture there have seen huge declines, some of up to 99%, and this has had cascading effects on the rest of the ecosystem, including disease and the population boom of other animal species. So we need vultures, they're necessary, and they do very important work. Friends, thank you so much for joining me for this third installment of Spooky Tuesdays. I hope you learned something cool about vultures that you didn't know before, and I hope that we have a better understanding of the importance of having these guys in our habitats. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll see you next week for more Spooky Tuesdays. Bye!